That's an interesting question because when you're in the moment, we're actually often pitted against each other. And while our natural inclination as kids might be to bond and to build trust, a lot of times the circumstance doesn't really allow for that.
Is it a wild thing to hear that you have a memoir out? I mean, what a feat.
Thank you. And I must say, I actually started gathering research for this 7 years ago. So the outline was sitting on my shelf, and I was actually ready to let it go and just move forward into my new career as a mental health practitioner. And then one of my literary agents said, I think this needs to come to fruition. So it's profound, a very labor intensive process. I don't wish the sleepless nights on anyone, but I do wish the personal liberation on the other side for everyone.
I mean, what a nice, at least full circle moment to come out on the other side and to be able to say that there's liberation on the other side of putting together this book of your life. And the title is telling. Semi-well adjusted despite literally everything. I mean, you lay it all out there in the title, but when people open up that hardcover and they dive in, what can they expect from this book?
Well, the title itself, I think, represents an unofficial mood of this year for many of us as we observe what's happening societally, culturally, and it invites us to reflect on the question, what does it mean to be well adjusted if the society itself is kind of dysfunctional and warped? And so I'm not only unpacking my personal experiences in entertainment, and yes, you get to hear exactly what happened on all of those sets growing up, never before shared very intimate and vulnerable details. And I'm also unpacking a lot of different themes from mental health to all of us trying to navigate privacy and purpose and identity in a digital age to these larger cultural questions that have shaped all of us. So I think folks might show up for the childhood chaos, but I hope they stay for the cultural critique.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they will. You've been sharing stories about what it was like to be a young person growing up in this industry. You've been super open about it before even launching a podcast series. And now you continue to share those stories. What is your why for continuing to share these stories and putting them to paper like this?
Yes, what I've noticed is that we see this series of memoirs and documentaries highlighting the exact same pipeline of downward spirals for young performers. While a while ago it used to be for film and TV actors, now it's young children who are documented online and in content that's monetized. So the funnel has broadened significantly. And what I noticed is that no one had ever unpacked why this happens, and no one had proposed how to intervene. And so I recognized now as a mental health practitioner, I sit at a very interesting intersection where I can speak from lived experience while also shedding light on some of these concepts around child development, media culture, and these larger questions we can all reflect on. So while I would love to go hide in a corner forever, this does feel important to bring forward, especially to protect current and future generations.
Yeah, and you can tell that there's so much passion in the work that you do now, even releasing an artist well-being essentials toolkit. Tell us everything about that because it feels like a place that comes from, a very personal place within you, but even hearing you speak now, you can tell there's real drive behind this passion.
Yes, I feel so invigorated by the fact that we have officially designed the first of its kind manual that all of us needed growing up. And it's this comprehensive digital toolkit for young artists and their families, guardians, for them to understand the unique pressures and consequences of getting into the industry and the kind of tools that will help them manage performance related activities. For example, if a young child is being asked to reenact a traumatic scene on set repeatedly, surrounded by strangers, that can take quite a toll, especially if they're at an age where they can't differentiate fantasy from reality and they haven't formed their own identity. So it's blurred lines between character and real self. And so there are certain techniques like enrolling and de-rolling to help them get into and out of character and to process and release whatever stress came with that so that there's not bleed off into their everyday life. So This, I'm hoping, becomes the new standard, and it was designed by a team of experts inside and out of the industry. And really, I think it's a testimony to the fact that once we know better, we can do better. So I'm eager to see how productions respond. And in addition to the toolkit, I'm also a certified mental health coordinator. So I can be on sets actually providing some of this support.
How much do you think, if this support had existed when you were a young actor, how beneficial it would have been?
When I look at what I call the toddler to trainwreck pipeline, I notice that from the outside, most of the time, people only see the facade of everything going well. And it's hard to recognize that in addition to these high moments, things are happening like 80-hour work weeks, being removed from school, having to modify your body and appearance, having a company own your name and likeness, managing unexpected safety issues like dealing with stalkers or even decoding kidnapping plots. And all of these, of course, are going to bring stress to the body. And so when I was experiencing high levels of anxiety, now I understand that was actually a natural, normal, and healthy response to experiences that were far too intense for a young body to go through. And I understand now that all of the coping strategies that came with it, for me, that included developing an eating disorder and being a super overachiever, that actually was my best attempt at making sense of the experience while having very little agency in my own life path. So, had I had these tools, and especially the adults around me, had they been given some of this information, I imagine we would have re examined our approach to the industry, our level of involvement, and maybe we might have even decided, hey, local community theater is the best route for now. And if you want to come back as an adult, let's do it. But there are a lot of implications that we simply didn't know at the time.
Yeah, and there have been other childhood entertainers that are now adults that have come forward and shared, different but similar experiences. Demi Lovato is one. You mentioned Demi in your book. Even in one of the videos celebrating the launch of the toolkit, there's a clip from Demi's documentary where Demi's talking about how there's no manual to survive and navigate the industry. Now there is, thanks to your toolkit. But knowing that, you had peers going through similar but different hardships, did that make you feel less alone when you were growing up in this industry?
That's an interesting question because when you're in the moment, we're actually often pitted against each other. And while our natural inclination as kids might be to bond and to build trust, a lot of times the circumstance doesn't really allow for that. We're more so competition or we're so busy and isolated that we don't have time to build trust. And then there are other factors like the reality of adults and others taking advantage of you and maybe only sidling up to you because they want something from you. And so I think there were a lot of barriers psychologically and physically. I do recall having some close friendships and I hang on to them and cherish them to this day. However, I do think the social network for young performers is actually an area of opportunity where we could create more programs where the kids just get to be kids together and they don't have to be on all the time. And in fact, there is a program called Looking Ahead, and they do have some of these events. So I'm starting to see these things emerge. We're starting to get it. There is hope, but we definitely have to make changes now and urgently.
One of the moments that you talk about in your book is, of course, that iconic breakout moment with the one and only Missy Elliott when you were only 9 years old. When you think back to that time, what comes to mind about working with Missy Elliott and how quickly your life changed after that?
Working with Missy was such a joy. And my body tells me every time I speak about her and the experience, I feel warmth, I feel an open heartedness. And I think that reflects how gentle spirited she was and how kind she was, especially working with children. And, while her lyrics, of course, are often explicit and very mature, she did take as many steps as she could to create a safe environment for us to show up, do our dance, and then head home. I will say we were not expecting the overnight success of it all. I should put overnight in air quotes because I had already been working for 6 years by then, or performing for 6 years. Um, but I don't think we knew what it was going to be like to have these parasocial relationships with the general public, where suddenly people had full access to you and would approach you and expect certain things from you at any time. I mean, even going through security at the airport, you're not technically supposed to ask to pat down a minor, and yet they did. And it was actually only because they wanted a photo. And so I quickly was conditioned to understand that I should make myself available to whomever for whatever. And I wish I would have known concepts like bodily autonomy and consent so that I could have said, oh, wait, this is actually really uncomfortable. Is there a better way we can do this? But again, at the time, no one knew what to expect.
After that overnight success, I mean, you were so booked and so busy. I mean, Cheaper by the Dozen, Camp Rock, Step Up. And you talk about in the book at that time when behind the scenes, behind the glitz and the glamour, you were really struggling with body image. When did you realize that the pressure was negatively impacting your health and mental health in that way?
I wish I could say that I was noticing the signs as, a reflection of the larger systemic pressures, but at that young age, we tend to internalize it as if it's solely our fault. And sure, I wanted to be responsible for my actions, but I didn't understand that feeling the pressure to run X number of miles or to modify my eating habits really was a larger conversation around the diet and fitness industry, around media beauty standards. And so I was just trying to keep up and help reach the level of the standard that would allow me to continue working. What I did recognize later into my teens was that I could feel the tension between not wanting to project this onto other young people, yet having to uphold the standard in order to stay booked. And around 17, my health really started deteriorating. And so before that, I looked at my body basically as a project that I was trying to complete or an object I was constantly trying to fix. And then once it started falling apart, I realized, oh, this is the only earth suit I have for my entire life. This is something that needs deep care. Oh, wait, I need to nourish myself so I can show up. Something's going to have to change. And I started peeling back those layers once I was in treatment for my eating disorder.
Oh my gosh, well, thank you so much for being so candid. I'd love to switch gears and talk about something a little bit different. Phineas and Ferb. I mean, voicing Isabella for I think the better part of 20 years now. What's it been like being with a character for so long?
I have chills whenever I speak about the series. I'm so grateful that over the last 20 years, the cast and the crew have continued to deepen our connection with each other creatively and professionally. And back in the day, when I first booked the character, of course, I had very few life experiences to pull from. Now, as an adult, still playing someone so young, I can make different kinds of creative decisions that imbue humor and maybe some cleverness, or, I can play with the tonality in ways that before I just simply, didn't know how to do. So I think it's become even more fun. I was just in the studio yesterday. Hopefully, I can say that. And the episodes crack me up. There's one in particular, if you have a chance to watch, I think the title of the episode is called Lord of the Firesides. And my character, Isabella, absolutely loses her mind, and you'll see why, but I definitely got to play with different emotions than what we were used to with her character.
If Isabella were to put out a memoir, what do you think it would be called and what do you think it would be about?
Oh, I imagine that Isabella would veer away from memoir and focus more on a self-help book, some kind of 10-step manual to cultivating leadership skills so you too can empower those in your community to contribute to whatever community service project. She's, I think, someone I can look up to, even if I'm physically looking down to her.
Well, Alyson, I think it's safe to say a lot of people are looking up to you. Thank you for sharing your honesty and for your leadership in the mental health space. Hopefully the industry continues to make strides in the right direction with this toolkit and with the stories that you tell and the work that you do.
Yes, I am excited for people to read the memoir and see what conversations are started.